right now you don't need more leads to achieve your goal, your 2022 goals that are maybe plus 20%, plus 30%. You don't need plus 20% of leads. You need to focus on the quality of the treatments of your consumer to provide a better individualized experience to your consumer that will play on the conversion rate, which make you achieve your goals.
Welcome to the State of CRM podcast. I'm Matt.
Welcome, I'm Ben.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of CRM, but specifically over the past, really few years, fairly recently, technology as well as sort of pressures placed on CRM marketers have evolved the way they've had to, or what best practices look like and how they've had to sort of evolve to deliver for their business. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the state of things, before this happened, kind of what marketers were deploying at that point, and how they can sort of get to a point where they're delivering on business objectives and kind of embracing sort of the modern day state of CRM. And a lot of this is, the reason this has sort of come about is because, first and foremost, and we don't need to go into this in a lot of detail, but consumer behavior has changed. So we've talked about this a lot. Everybody's hearing this everywhere, but I think it's important just to note, to set this up, that the way that consumers are consuming media is much different now than even 10 years ago. The channels that brands can use to essentially build relationships with them are different in terms of what they are able to use, but also what consumers are spending more time on. But what's interesting actually is we still see email being very, very prominent among those. And then also just the digitization of commerce. So we thought during the pandemic that it would push everybody into digital, which we actually saw during the holiday season was a bit of a resurgence of in-store shopping. So what has emerged is sort of this hybrid shopping behavior that the consumers are embracing, and CRM marketers need to take advantage of this in order to deliver effective strategies. And then we have the emergence of new technologies that enable marketers to measure in new ways, to be able to optimize in new ways, to be able to deliver campaigns in more effective, personalized ways than before. So opening up a huge opportunity for marketers to evolve their strategies with the technology that they're able to deploy. And then I think lastly, we're seeing sort of a shift in general, and I've worked in marketing for a while, and this has been the case for me as well, that businesses are putting pressure on marketers to deliver in new ways, to align the metrics that they're using with the business metrics that the company is measuring its own success on. So there's sort of a pressure for marketers not only to deliver those metrics, to be able to show what they're delivering and how. So I think like those three big things, shifts in the consumer, new tech, and business pressures, have caused a shift in terms of what best practices look like for CRM marketers. But I think before we can talk about that evolution, it probably makes sense to take a little bit of a step back. And CRM marketing, especially as it relates to digital, it's been around for a while now. So let's go back 5, 10, 15 years and talk a little bit about, what marketers were doing back then. What is the old way look like?
Yeah, and you said we'll call that the old way because that's been practiced for years. And to prepare the episode, I had to scratch my head also and say, okay, what I was doing 15 years ago, 10 years ago, that's changed, and try to note all of that and take the differences. And one of the big change to me, the biggest change is the way the CRM approach the marketing and the goal. So at this time, like in 2010, we're collecting like a lot of profiles. So collecting opt-in, getting more people in the database for cheap, with the only goal, or one of the main goal, was just to generate traffic on the website. And so that was really driving mass traffic, getting traffic from a mass campaign, and the batch and blast we are talking like every week. Mm-hmm. The goal being in a silo for the CRM, and then the traffic come in the website or in store, and that's depending on the situation or the business. That's either the sales rep in store or the website team that get traffic on the website and is trying their best to convert that. These practices were not really good in a way that you collect cheap leads, cheap opt-ins. You're able to contact them over and over, and because actually the acquisition of this profile are very cheap, you can just put a lot of pressure on them, fatigue them. You have a big attrition, a lot of churn on your database. Doesn't matter because they are cheap to acquire. So the marketing and CRM practices at this time were very focused on one or two metrics based on the engagement and not the full experience, the full funnel. And then we get this weird discussion with the team in charge of the website saying that, okay, that's great, we got X million of traffic this month, but actually only 0.5% converted or something like that. That's, I mean, I don't want to say the term, but there was some words going on saying that to reflect the bad quality of the traffic, and that's really what's happened for years. Another thing was not a lot of time to do something else than blast. I mean, segmentation was only based, and already I remember the time that we are doing RFM segmentation. I mean, engagement and activity segmentation. Who engaged or clicked open in an email in the last 3 months, 6 months, and segments based on that. That's not really segmentation. We talked about that last week, but that's just slicing down the database in 3-4 blocks, which is not really different than blast.
Yeah, I mean, optimization in that world is pretty limited to, these proxy metrics is kind of what they are. They're metrics that aren't directly reflective of revenue, but that marketers were using to sort of theoretically assume that if you got, 75% higher clicks on one campaign, it would be more likely to drive X amount of revenue. Same thing with opens as well. And so those were, kind of to your point around segmentation, the metrics that marketers were looking to optimize. Or in a lot of cases, we're talking about this as if it were the past, but I think it's important to note that, the reason we're discussing this today is because we're seeing a lot of these tactics still being deployed presently, even though I think, we need to be kind of thinking beyond that as CRM marketers to be able to deliver for our business. And, when you optimize towards those sort of like higher funnel metrics, just below awareness, what you see is like focus on optimizing open rates, trying to get people to open the email, trying to get people to click the various click fields within the email, and not so much on optimizing towards building brand equity or getting them interested in your product. It's sort of not, I don't want to say tricking them, but it's basically deploying every capability that you have to try to elevate those metrics, when in reality, to your point, what you're doing is essentially not optimizing the quality of the interactions and the quality of the contacts that you have access to. And ultimately for the consumer as well, what that does is it doesn't create the best experience, because why we buy things is because something is relevant to us. We buy things because we're able to and we want to.
Yeah, and that's what you're saying. That's really important. That it worked in the past. We are still seeing that deployed for a lot of team and companies. That's surprising that there are still so many companies applying that as tactic. And there is a positive side of it. I can see it, understand that the short-term return might be better for this week revenue. But the fact that you are accelerating or pressuring your database right now is just killing it for the long-term. Yeah. I mean, the long-term game. I mean, the plan is to stay. And everyone listening to us today is aware that the lifetime value of the client is better for the business. I mean, the longer the clients stay and purchase and repeat purchase with your brand, that's better for the business. And these tactics were not really efficient for that, and that's why that's not really the best play we can do right now, and why marketers are shifting, and we'll come to the tactics that's are more efficient for that in minutes. But I mean, one of the other thing I wanted to comment on what you said, Matt, is all of these proxy metrics will maybe help a team to reach their goal, but the issue is that the goals are not set correctly. Because if someone is just stepping back and looking at the full funnel, the full experience, at the end of the day, what's matter is the cost of conversion. I mean, what was the marketing cost deployed to get one conversion, one order? And you can buy cheap opt-in, have a great open rate and click rate, and if you don't have conversion because that's poor quality and no interest for your brand or your product, at the end of the day, the cost per order is just crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's crazy because it's so challenging to be able to scale that strategy and kind of like bring it around to like the only way to scale it is to do what you were saying earlier, and that's either send it to more people or to increase frequency, which if you're, if somebody, and I think it also, like, one thing that's important to think about is just because someone's not in a buying cycle today doesn't mean they won't be in a buying cycle 6 months from now. And so when you employ that or deploy that strategy, what you're essentially going to be doing then is shooting yourself in the foot later, because that person is going to be either trained to ignore your communication or just simply so over being reached out to that they're not going to buy from you. So like kind of what you were talking about, harming long-term value. And that's the death cycle that essentially leads to that increased cost per conversion that you were mentioning.
Yeah, and the 5, 6, 10 communication that you are sending them to try to force them to change their mind to buy it right now will eventually turn them as detractors instead of, I mean, passive or supporters. That can really be detractor because you are over pressuring them, and that's just the best case is that they ignore your brand, but the worst case can be really a big damage for your brand awareness.
Yeah, 100%.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so like kind of like that's kind of, the old world of doing things, and not again, I say old world in the sense of like
it's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
We are doing it,
and it's still being used today.
It.
Yeah, but I think kind of thinking about those 3 factors I mentioned at the beginning: consumer shifts, tech shifts, and business pressures. Marketers need to sort of evolve along with those trends, and I think the first step is sort of moving away from. And, we've said this before, but those proxy metrics like opens and clicks and driving traffic to a website, and focusing more on talking to customers who are in a buying cycle, creating relevant experiences, and essentially generating, richer traffic to your website or immediate conversions. And that really comes down to, again, starting sort of with the KPIs that are aligned with your business, and then thinking about how you create those relevant experiences. And not, I think the first thing to do is thinking about, okay, segmentation. So I want to move away from batch and blast. We know that's not a great experience. It's the quickest way to probably generate an immediate spike in visits to your website, for example. But to your point, and what we've been talking about, that traffic is going to be diminished in quality. You're going to have a ton of traffic that's never, ever, ever going to convert. So what you want to be able to do is to be able to find relevant audiences for the messages that you're sending out. And we know now that because of tech capabilities that allow for better personalization, allow for you to identify demand at the individual level, you're able to actually start thinking about, okay, well, I can send more campaigns, but instead of increasing pressure for everyone, I'm going to send more campaigns to people who actually want to receive the messages that I'm sending. And then you don't need to worry as much about open rate or click rate, because the relevancy itself will elevate those metrics. And that's kind of, I think, the first major step marketers need to think about. What are the business level KPIs that the business is aligning itself towards? How can marketing support that? And then like, how do I actually drive consumers down the funnel to be able to achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it should be done. I know, and I can't remember if that was last week or 2 weeks ago we mentioned that, but everyone is sitting on a ton of data. I mean, a mountain of data. It's time to use it. Technology is, we are able to get the data. Technology exists to use it. And we are not saying using it to do some query, selecting like 5 obvious attributes with first name, date of birth, and average spent in the last months. That's not this obvious data that's are not really relevant, but data that can help to understand what's your clients, your consumer wants to achieve, what they are expecting, and grouping them based on that. That might regroup a lot of different social demographic categories, but that's fine. They all, and so your community, they all want to achieve the same goal, or they want the same experience. So your work will be much easier to provide this experience, whoever they are. And the other thing is I wanted to mention is that can be scary, or some people can freak out internally saying that, oh, what happened? You just divided the traffic by 2, half of it disappeared. Yeah, but again, just look at the end of the funnel. What's the cost of conversion? What's the effort you put in to create these orders? Maybe you have more effort. Maybe the cost per visit will increase. But if you bring only people with intent, or way more people with intent engagement, they will better convert. And at the end, that's better for the business, for the KPIs, for the goal, for the long-term achievement of your brand.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really interesting. Is sort of like that trade-off between volume and quality, and it requires a little bit of, I think, education and whatnot throughout your organization as well, because I'm sure there are stakeholders that are still, to your point, expecting higher volume of traffic. But what you need to be able to prove out is that's not necessarily where optimization efforts should lead you. And I think kind of thinking about long-term value as well, like this creates a better experience for your customers. Like in that data that you were mentioning, your customers are telling you everything that you need to know about when to reach them, how to reach them, which products they want to buy, when they're in a buying cycle, when they're not in a buying cycle. It's all there. And we have the capabilities now versus 5-10 years ago to actually inform strategies to be able to deliver on that information. And what's going to happen is essentially you're going to capture demand now, and you're probably going to, to your point, lower traffic, but the higher, you're going to have a higher conversion rate and a lower cost per conversion. And then ultimately, long term, it's going to have sort of residual effects as well, because you're going to be keeping consumers engaged with your brand. And so that when they are in a buying cycle for any particular product, you're going to be able to reach them at the right moment. So it increases customer lifetime value and ultimately revenue as well, which are the business goals that you need to be able to achieve. Those are business goals that your company is going to care about. And then now you're in a world where your marketing program is aligned with what your business expects it to deliver, sort of in this new world that we're living in.
Yeah, and you know that sometime we have discussion. I had a discussion on this topic recently with the clients, saying that's complicated to do all of these things, adding more and more and more. But when you see that, or you see the work you need to involve, you need to bring the bandwidth needed to do all of that at the scale of the blast, yeah, that's complicated. But what we are saying is that maybe 25%, 30%, 50% of the volume of your consumer don't need any attention right now, because they don't bring anything to your brand and to your business. if you focus on a smaller part of your database, you have more ability to do tailor-made experience, to do individualization, all of that. So that's positive loop. I mean, that's you have less people to care about, so you provide a better experience, so you have a better conversion rate, and so better return on investments on the time and on everything. And that's the way you drive a better business on the long term. And because you are doing that, the word of mouth, all of that, your brand awareness will increase, and you'll get all people interested by that. So you won't have, or you not you won't have, but you have less work to do to qualify who has a real intent, who wants really to engage, and all of that will work together and improve and scale on the long term.
Yeah, your short-term reach may decrease, but
for sure.
But conversions will increase.
Yeah. Because I mean, that you were saying that we were mentioning that some people internally don't understand. I mean, their goal is to how do we make more traffic, because they just think about one side of the coin. The other side is the conversion rate. They want more traffic because they think that all the traffic convert at 1%. I don't know what's your conversion rate. But, I mean, divide the traffic by half and convert at 4%. I mean, do the math, but you'll make more money. I mean, that's just... you can play on both sides, and one side and just the traffic, assuming that you will get the same conversion rate, is not the right way to do it. Because, by the way, you won't convert additional traffic at the same rate as you are doing right now, because you're adding less qualified people, less intended consumer, so the conversion rate will also drop.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think I think we need to think a little bit around, like, I'm sure marketers on the call right now are thinking, like, what can I do to do this? Like, okay, sounds great. But what are the actions that I can take? And I think I think you have a lot of tactical ideas that we were talking about before the podcast. I think it all starts with what I mentioned earlier, and that's changing your own mindset around this sort of like trade-off between optimizing volume and optimizing quality. And I think also that also translates to the need for you to also educate your business about this. And if you start with the KPIs, because as we talked about, businesses are putting pressure on marketers to deliver business objectives, and you lay out that this is how that can be done, and that the proxy metrics are metrics of the past, like that's a win in and of itself, because then you're going to get that organizational support behind you to be able to do the tactical things that are required to execute that. So I think it'd be great to hear kind of like from your perspective, having been in CRM throughout this evolution, what are some of the things marketers can think about?
Yeah, I mean, on the educational part, or the change of your mindset, I see two cases. The first one is that right now you are CRM manager, you are maybe head of CRM, listening to that, say, okay, what should I do? The first thing is you can't change. I mean, even if you are convinced, and I'm happy that if you are convinced that's the right way to do it, you will face or fear the fact that how do I convince my boss or the organization to do that? So the best way is to do the exercise, actually, to not change your metrics right now, but to add other metrics, the overall view to your dashboard, or to make some simulation and see how it is right now, and present that to, I mean, if you're a CRM manager, present that to your boss. If you are head of CRM, present that to your CMO, to your head of marketing. I mean, whoever is higher in the organization, and that can help to support the vision, the understanding on that. And the other case is that if you are, or at a CMO place, a VP of marketing, CMO, whatever the name in the organization, and you are in charge of these strategies, having the team that can execute on that. If you are convinced about it, just look at, and we are at the end of the year, so usually that's pretty often that's time for annual review, setting goals for next year, all of that. Check out the list of the goal you gave to your team. I had so many time discussion with CMOs saying that, yeah, that's right, that's what we are doing. Meanwhile, the team objective or individual objective are to increase open rate.
Yeah.
That doesn't match. So as a CMO, be sure that the entire organization that report to you understand it and their objective are crystal clear on the fact that if the open rate decrease a little bit, but the traffic is of a better quality that drive a better conversion rate, that's good. That's no problem.
Yeah.
And that's really the first thing to think about.
Yeah. I think, we were talking a little bit about it earlier and you had mentioned this, and I think I'd like to maybe explore it a little bit more now that we're talking about tactics, is also you had mentioned the use of data. So I think that's a challenge for marketers. Like we talk to people all the time who are challenged with this. I was talking to somebody today who is a year into onboarding their CDP and still not quite there from a data perspective, has all this loyalty data, has data from their SMS provider, has internal transactional data, and all of this first-party data which it can provide, as you mentioned, a wealth of information. However, she was just very challenged to be able to figure out how to make heads or tails of it. And so I think putting a strategy together for how you can start using the data that you have access to in the short term is key. And I think it starts with understanding, if you're using a marketing cloud or you're using an ESP or whatever you're using for activation, what data is it using now?
Yeah.
And where can it be improved? And also, if you don't know what data it's using now, that's when you need to start having conversations with your IT team to figure out exactly what's available, what's being used, and what should be used.
Yeah. So let's try to do that. To summarize it, because we can talk about data forever. In one sentence, 3 types of data, main way of categorizing them: zero-party data, first-party data, third-party data. Unfortunately, most of the marketers, when we talk to them, they focus on saying, "Oh, how can I enrich and use third-party data to do a better experience?" Yeah, but start by using zero-party data and first-party data correctly. You don't need the third-party data. By the way, all of that is fading with all the privacy on mobile or all of that. But even without all this privacy thing, start to use the data that your consumer are giving you, what the real explicit information that the consumer is giving you, zero-party data. First-party data, they are not telling you that explicitly, but or with intention to share that. But you know when they purchase, what's maybe what product they saw on the website. The number of touch points, all of that. You have this data. Use that, because that data points are the relationship, that are the touch points between them and your brand.
Yeah.
Who cares about their experience with another brand or the third-party interaction from a news website? The value of this data is not the same, and unfortunately, the focus is not on the right side, I think. And so that's the third part on the data. The other thing is you should be able. I lost my idea on the first party data, but on the first party data and zero party data, you really need to use that in your marketing cloud, as you say, Matt. And that in most of the cases, few data are shared in these marketing clouds. No later than yesterday, we had a conversation saying that, okay, with a potential client, asking, okay, you have a marketing cloud, to name it, that's Salesforce. Big part of the market is using Salesforce, fine. what data you have accessible in Salesforce. We have a connector. We can get this data to help you to supercharge, adding superpower to your Salesforce. And the reply from the IT and the tech team is, no, we provide Salesforce the minimum of data they need to send a communication. Okay, so you have data, but you don't provide or feed the marketing tool that the marketing team is using every day with the data about consumer. So the marketing team is using the email, the first name, the zip code, and the date of birth. And they're sitting on, a mass of data on the data lake.
Yeah,
that's more work to do. We are not sure if that will be used correctly. Yeah, but to your point, Matt, that start to look into what you have access to in your tool. Actually, every day in the tool you are using, not what is available in the company, but you never see that. and that's a real first step that will help to uncover actually what is accessible, what you can maybe add and request or get the data team, the IT team to provide your marketing cloud or your tool, whatever the part of the stack you are using in a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think one thing you mentioned is zero-party data as well, and I'm surprised as to how many marketers aren't collecting this or figuring out exactly who their consumer base is. And this is stuff that's not super difficult to do. You could set up preference centers. There's ways you can collect demographic information, but if you don't know who's single or who has kids or some basic information like that in and of itself can tell you so much about, what you should be delivering to certain customers. And that, again, to your point, it's not something you need to purchase or anything like that. That's just listening to the voice of your customers. And I think too, kind of going back to when we were talking about evolutions, one of the things that we were mentioning is technology as well. And there's constantly innovations in technology that can help you make use of your first-party data, even outside of a CDP, even outside of a cloud or a data lake, or if you are using that, you're even better set up to be able to plug into systems of intelligence that can help you reach the ultimate goal of individualizing your communication, which I think brings us probably to the last point, which is ultimately that's the holy grail that's going to get you those quality conversations that are going to lead to conversions, is that individualized approach. So once you can use your data, that's when you can start understanding when you should be reaching customers, how you should be reaching them, and with what communication, what content should you be putting in front of them, and not just 1 or 2 or 10 segments, but granular to the point, ideally on the individual level, so that you're sending out custom communication. And technology can help with that as well. You don't have to create a different email experience for the 10 million customers in your database. There's ways to be automating this. We live in a different world of CRM. And even if you don't have the resources to plug into all of these different capabilities, there's things that you can do now to translate your data into intelligence and then inform whatever activation channels you're using, even if it's only an ESP, but even better from a multi-channel perspective as well.
And that's definitely the right moment of the year to think about it. I'm sure everyone is already thinking about the plan for 2022. What are the projects? How to do it? How will you change your strategy in order to achieve your goal? Because you can't apply the same strategy, same campaign plan, and achieve your goal that I'm sure are increasing in terms of demand. Our demand or revenue, because ultimately that's the business goal, to increase the revenue, and it's time to think about how do you change that. So maybe to summarize, Matt, right now you don't need more leads to achieve your goal, your 2022 goals that are maybe plus 20%, plus 30%. You don't need plus 20% of leads. You need to focus on the quality of the treatment of your consumer to provide a better individualized experience to your consumer that will play on the conversion rate, which make you achieve your goals.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think when we mentioned it a million different times, but that shift in mindset right now from proxy metrics to business goals. And you're going to start speaking the language of your executive team. And when you put that plan together for 2022, it's just going to be all the more, not easy necessarily, but you're going to have that momentum and the internal support for you to be able to get some of this stuff done and the resources required to do so.
And last tip before closing up, if you do that, and we said it's that still a lot of market is not doing, a lot of people in the market are not doing it, a lot of brands are not applying that, you will have differentiation in the communication. You will differentiate your brand from others, and that's easier win right now than it will be in 3, 4, 5 years.
100%. Yeah. Savvy, forward-thinking marketers are generally rewarded well. So I think this is a big opportunity to do so, and not something that is a 10-year strategy, but to your point, Ben, something that you can start thinking about today.
Yep. Thank you very much for listening today. Matt, say goodbye and see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.